So I was just scrolling on Twitter when I saw a bombshell drop from the owner of Lunar Client, Matt, in a tweet that said, imagine copying code from other mods, pasting it in your mod pack, calling it a client, and then charging people $12.50 for access. Yikes. And then in this tweet, he links to a thread that kind of talks about how scummy Feather Client is. If you want to check out this thread yourself, I'd recommend, I'm going to link it in the description, and I'm going to be pulling a lot of what I'm going to be saying from that thread. But I'm basically going to summarize everything you probably need to know. So let's go over it. One piece of information I'm going to read word for word is right here. Feather Client is basically a modded Forge and Fabric client that people are using for only $12.50. You and a friend of yours can get Forge and a cosmetic only for the buyer. Pretty great deal, right? Now, if you couldn't tell, this is sarcasm. What he's basically saying is you're getting entirely ripped off. Now, before I go any further, I want to go over this tweet from the owner of Lunar Client that says, basically, if you didn't know, the owner of Feather Client is the same people who were the owner of PvP Lounge. 5 years ago, they basically had a PvP Lounge server, which you had to pay $10 to get access to their beta, and then their server eventually shut down. So it's kind of like they paid for a server to get whitelisted and it didn't go anywhere, and it's kind of sounding like Feather Client that could potentially be something where the consumers are paying basically for no reason anyway, but they're paying to get access to this client, and what could potentially happen is it never actually goes public or it never becomes free. The point is it's shady. Now let's continue. Feather Client is directly taking code from other mod creators. The example provided in the thread is from Patcher Mod. I'm going to show Feather Client's code, and then I'm going to show Patcher's code here. The biggest problem with this is it's basically stealing codes that were licensed. Feather Client is using something that does not belong to them. There are more examples in the thread, but I suggest checking them out if you educate yourself even more. This next part I want to cover is basically mod developers not supporting Feather Client. And for the example in this thread, they go over Skytills, which is a Hypixel Skyblock Utilities mod, which Feather Client had but was removed from Feather Client, and this screenshot right here is going to explain it perfectly, and I'm just going to read it for you. There's a good few reasons Skytills was removed from Feather. You can't take ice cream and eat it and then ask if you're allowed to have it after eating it. They are paywalling Feather Client and effectively turning Skytills into the very thing it was created to replace, a paid extra Skyblock mod. In addition to this, they are also indirectly profiting from our users through their cosmetics, which we receive no financial compensation for. It's obfuscated and also filled with bad code. This makes it hard to support it and or debug issues between the two. We don't have enough resources to actually support this, but by having Skytills on Feather Mod's store, we indirectly say that we want to support it while we don't. To summarize this to better understanding, basically Feather Client took these mods without permission and they're making money off it while the mod creators or developers aren't. So they're capitalizing off of other people's work. And the biggest thing to understand here is they did this without permission. And there's even more in the thread. Again, I suggest you check it out and understand and inform yourself as well. But what we can gather from this is Feather Client is kind of scummy and something I don't think I'd want to support, especially if I have to pay to even use the client. Everything I've listed on here is public information you can go and see. I'm not just calling it out and I'm not just making things up. This is all factual. You can go see this in the thread. And it honestly just seems like a giant cash grab and something you can definitely manipulate an audience into thinking, oh, this looks really cool, so maybe I can convince them to buy it even though it's nothing special, and there's a lot of shady things going on behind the scenes. What I would compare this to is like taking stuff from other people's texture pack and then I release it as my own, but instead I charge you $1 to even get the texture pack, even though the textures aren't even mine. I just took it from somebody else's. That's kind of what it's like with Feather Client. It's not directly like that, but it's kind of like that. The last thing I want to leave you guys off on is this tweet from the Lunar Client owner, Matt, where he says, do they really not see the problem with charging people access to a client whose main selling point is being able to load in other people's mods? I'd love to know what you guys think about this down in the comment section below. Are you still going to be using Feather Client, or are you just going to wait and see if it actually goes free? And if it does, will you still use it? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.